Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something that might just change the way you look at your life. What if the very thing holding you back isn't your circumstances, your past, or your lack of opportunities, but simply what you don't know? Too often we focus on what's missing around us when the real barrier is what's missing within us. Not because we're not smart, not because we're not capable, but because we've allowed ignorance to become, we've accepted not knowing as normal, and that silent acceptance is blocking doors we didn't even realize existed. In this moment, I want you to lean in, not with your ears, but with your mind, because what I'm about to share isn't just information, it's a mirror that will show you how ignorance is quietly building walls between you and your future. And once you see it, you'll never go back to living the same. Ignorance is not innocence. It's a barrier. Innocence implies purity, a harmless lack of wrongdoing. But ignorance is different. It is not merely the absence of information. It is often the rejection of it. It is not a state of peace, but a wall that separates a person from growth, opportunity, and transformation. Ignorance limits perception, blinds potential, and builds an invisible cage around the mind. It whispers that everything is fine the way it is, even when everything is broken. It convinces people that what they know is enough and that seeking more is unnecessary or even dangerous. This mindset doesn't just delay progress, it denies. Many people stay stuck, not because of what they know, but because of what they don't know. And worse, because they don't even realize what they don't know. They move in circles, make the same mistakes, accept small lives, and settle for average outcomes because their vision is limited by their ignorance. It shapes how they think, how they behave, and how they see the world. They interpret life from a narrow lens, unaware that there are entire realms of understanding, creativity, and possibility beyond their current awareness. What you don't know can hurt you financially, emotionally, spiritually, and relationally, can lead to poor decisions, missed opportunities, and unfulfilled potential. Ignorance is not gentle, it is silently destructive. In a world full of accessible knowledge, willful ignorance becomes even more dangerous. Information is everywhere, but transformation only happens when a person is willing to seek it, receive it, and apply it. Ignorance resists this process. It prefers comfort over challenge. It resists change, even when that change is necessary for survival or success. It hides behind pride, ego, tradition, or fear. Sometimes people mistake ignorance for humility, thinking that staying quiet or staying uninformed is wise. But true humility is a hunger to learn. It's the recognition that there's always more to understand, more to grow into. Ignorance, on the other hand, assumes it already knows enough. Every breakthrough in life begins with knowledge. Knowledge of who you are, where you are, and what you must do next. Without that awareness, you can be full of talent, full of dreams, full of passion, and still be blocked. Ignorance builds walls where doors should be. It clouds judgment, stunts creativity, and distorts purpose. It makes people afraid of what they've never experienced, suspicious of what they've never studied, and hostile to what they don't understand. That fear of the unknown becomes a lifelong fence that keeps them inside familiar territory, never realizing how much more there is beyond it. Even worse, ignorance is often inherited. People pass down belief systems, fears, misconceptions, and limited perspectives to the next generation, not out of malice, but out of ignorance. Entire communities and cultures can be shaped by what they do not know, creating cycles of poverty, violence, and despair, not because hope is unavailable, but because the knowledge that leads to hope is unreachable or ignored. That's why exposure is so powerful. When someone sees what they've never seen before, hears a new idea, or learns a truth that challenges their old thinking, the wall of ignorance begins to crack. Light begins to shine in places that were once dark. Ignorance can hide in silence, in busyness, in tradition, in routines. It can mask itself as confidence or even faith. But true growth requires the courage to admit, I don't know, and the discipline to go find out. It is not weakness to seek knowledge, it is strength. It is not rebellion to question what you've always believed, it is freedom, because when ignorance is removed, possibilities expand. When truth replaces assumption, progress accelerates. And when knowledge enters, the future finally opens. Lack of knowledge leads to poor decisions. Every choice a person makes is influenced by what they understand, what they believe, and what they perceive. When that understanding is shallow or flawed, decisions are made based on incomplete truths, assumptions, or emotions, rather than clarity and wisdom. Knowledge is not just information, it is direction. It is the foundation on which strategies are built, paths are chosen, and consequences are weighed. Without knowledge, a person is forced to rely on guesswork, tradition, or instinct, which can often lead them down a path of regret, struggle, or unnecessary pain. Decisions made in ignorance rarely consider the long-term impact, and they often prioritize comfort over wisdom, speed over strategy, and ease over excellence. In moments of crisis or opportunity, knowledge becomes the compass. Without it, people often misinterpret situations, overestimate their abilities, or underestimate the risks. They can be easily manipulated by emotion, influenced by pressure, or distracted by appearances. This leads to decisions that may feel right in the moment, but carry hidden costs that unfold over time. A lack of financial knowledge, for instance, can lead to debt, missed investments, or a lifetime of paycheck-to-paycheck living. A lack of relationship knowledge can result in toxic patterns, unhealed wounds, and repeated cycles of brokenness. A lack of self-knowledge leads to wasted years chasing validation, pursuing the wrong goals, or trying to become someone they're not. Poor decisions are rarely the result of malice. They are usually the result of ignorance. People don't destroy their potential on purpose. They simply don't know better. They've never been taught, they've never been shown another way. They've never been exposed to the truth that could have empowered a wiser choice. That's why learning is more than academic. It's personal, it's urgent, because every new insight gives you an advantage. Every piece of understanding sharpens your vision, strengthens your instincts, and prepares you for decisions that will define your future. Knowledge isn't about knowing everything, it's about knowing enough to act wisely. In life, people are constantly faced with decisions. Some small, some life-altering, what career to pursue, who to trust, where to invest, when to walk away, how to lead, when to speak, and when to stay silent. These choices don't come with guarantees, but they do come with consequences. And without knowledge, those consequences are unpredictable. A decision made in darkness might feel safe, but it's like navigating a maze blindfolded. You might move, but you won't move with confidence or direction. You won't know what dangers you're stepping into or what opportunities you're walking past. Knowledge doesn't eliminate uncertainty, but it reduces the margin of error. Even worse, a lack of knowledge makes people overconfident in what they think they know. They become rigid in thinking, unwilling to seek advice or admit when they're wrong. Pride thrives where knowledge is absent because there's no standard to measure against. When people don't know the truth, they create their own version of it and live by it, even when it's destroying them. This is why some people seem stuck, always repeating the same patterns, always dealing with the same issues. It's not that they're cursed, it's that they're uninformed. And the cost of that ignorance shows up in their daily decisions. To make wise decisions, knowledge must be pursued intentionally. It requires humility to say, I don't know, and courage to ask, can you teach me? It takes discipline to study, to listen, to reflect before reacting. But the reward is clarity. The reward is peace. The reward is a future built on solid ground, not shaky guesses. Because the moment knowledge increases, decision-making improves. And when decisions are wise, the direction of life shifts. Progress accelerates. Purpose becomes clearer. Mistakes become fewer. And the future becomes something you lead, not something you survive. Ignorance feeds fear and limits confidence. What people do not understand, they tend to avoid. And what they avoid, they never master. Fear is not always a reaction to danger. It is often a response to the unknown. When someone lacks knowledge or understanding, their mind fills in the blanks with worry, hesitation, or worst-case scenarios. Ignorance becomes fertile ground for fear to grow, creating mental barriers where none truly exist. This fear doesn't have to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes it shows up as quiet hesitation, constant self-doubt, or the habit of shrinking back from opportunities that demand growth. When people do not know what they're capable of, what is possible, or how something works, they automatically assume the worst. They tell themselves it's too hard, too risky, or not for people like them, not because it's true, but because ignorance has made fear feel like truth. Confidence is built on certainty. It's not arrogance or blind optimism. It's the byproduct of knowledge. When you know what you're doing, what you're talking about, or what you're aiming for, you walk differently, speak differently, and move with authority. But when you're unsure, when your understanding is shallow or non-existent, you second guess yourself. You overthink, you delay, and you look for permission instead of taking initiative. Ignorance creates insecurity because you can't be confident about something you don't understand. You can fake it, but deep down you'll always be waiting for someone to expose your lack. This invisible tension holds many people back from taking bold steps, applying for the position, launching the idea, or speaking up when it matters most. Insecurity doesn't start with who you are. It starts with what you don't know. A person can be full of potential, creativity, and value, but if they've never been taught to see it or develop it, their self-perception becomes shaped by ignorance. This leads to missed opportunities, sabotaged relationships, and a life of playing small, not because they were meant to be small, but because they were never shown how to grow. Ignorance hides options. It closes mental doors. It makes people settle for environments and relationships that shrink them. It creates a false sense of limitation, making it difficult to dream, to believe, or to try again after failure. Fear that is rooted in ignorance is rational, but it feels real. That's why people fear success, fear rejection, fear change, or fear being seen. Not because they can't handle those experiences, but because they don't understand them. They've never been exposed to someone who walked that path successfully. They've never learned the tools to manage the pressure, navigate the rejection, or rise after falling. So fear becomes their counselor, their comfort zone, their silent guide, and confidence never has a chance to grow because it is being strangled by everything they don't know. Knowledge does more than inform, it liberates. It clears confusion, it brings clarity, and it disarms fear. The more you understand something, the less intimidated you feel by it. You move from panic to preparation, from reaction to strategy. You stop fearing what might happen and start focusing on what you can control. You stop imagining failure and start planning for success. Confidence grows not in the absence of fear, but in the presence of understanding. When you know what to expect, how to handle it, and what steps to take, you no longer shrink back, you rise up. Ignorance keeps you in the dark, but knowledge turns on the light. This is why personal growth must be intentional. You must seek out knowledge, expose yourself to new environments, ask better questions, and pursue clarity even when it's uncomfortable. Because fear thrives where ignorance lives, and confidence begins the moment you commit to understanding. When you learn, fear loses its grip. When you grow in knowledge, your courage expands. You no longer have to fake strength. You begin to live it from the inside out. Exposure changes everything. What you are exposed to has the power to completely redefine what you believe is possible, reshape how you see yourself, and transform the direction of your life. Many people live confined within invisible borders, not because of physical limitations, but because of a lack of exposure. When you've only seen a certain way of living, working, or thinking, you tend to assume that is all there is. You make choices based on your environment, your upbringing, your social circle, and your past. But once you are exposed to something greater, another way of living, a higher standard, a new possibility, you can never go back to thinking the same way again. Exposure stretches the mind. And once the mind is stretched by a new experience or insight, it cannot return to its original dimension. Most limitations are not rooted in reality. They are rooted in perception. And perception is shaped by exposure. A person who has never seen wealth up close may believe that financial freedom is a fantasy. Someone who has never witnessed healthy relationships may think dysfunction is normal. A young person who has never seen someone succeed in their field may assume that success is reserved for the few. But introduce them to a new world, a mentor who has walked the path, a story that breaks the mold, a moment that shows them more, and suddenly their old assumptions start to unravel. The world becomes bigger, possibilities become clearer, and belief begins to take root. Exposure doesn't immediately change your life, but it immediately changes your view of life, and that shift is the first step toward transformation. One of the greatest tragedies is that many people live and die within the boundaries of their original exposure. They never travel beyond their city, never build relationships beyond their comfort zone, never read books that challenge their thinking, or engage in conversations that stretch their understanding. They stay where it's familiar, not because it's right, but because it's all they know. And as a result, their dreams shrink to fit their surroundings. But exposure is the antidote to small thinking. It opens the door to innovation, creativity, and new levels of ambition. When you see someone who looks like you succeed, it gives you permission to believe that you can too. When you visit a place that operates at a higher level of excellence, you begin to question your own standards. When you hear a story that defies the odds, you start to wonder what you've been settling for. Exposure brings discomfort. And that's the point. It shakes your assumptions, confronts your excuses, and forces you to reevaluate what's possible. It may make you feel out of place, inadequate, or unprepared, but that tension is where growth begins. It reveals the gap between where you are and where you could be, and if you're willing to lean into that gap, it becomes a bridge. You begin to aspire higher, to prepare more diligently, to think more strategically. You begin to demand more from yourself, not because someone told you to, but because you've seen what's possible and now you want it for yourself. Exposure is also a mirror. It doesn't just show you the world. It shows you who you are in that world. It reveals areas where you've been ignorant, passive, or small-minded. It also awakens talents, dreams, and desires that were lying dormant, waiting to be activated by the right environment. When you are exposed to greatness, something inside you starts to rise. When you are exposed to excellence, your standards elevate. When you are exposed to truth, your lies start to crumble. This is why exposure must be pursued intentionally. Don't wait for it. Go find it. Read beyond your field. Travel beyond your town. Engage with people who challenge your thinking, and never stop expanding your world. Because once you are exposed to more, you can never unsee it. And that vision becomes the fuel for a future you never imagined. Your future depends on what you're willing to learn. Every dream, every goal, every breakthrough you hope to experience is directly tied to your capacity and willingness to learn something new. Learning isn't just a phase that ends with graduation. It's a lifelong posture that determines whether you evolve or remain stuck. People do not rise because of what they know. They rise because they keep expanding what they know. Growth only happens when you're willing to confront your limitations, acknowledge your gaps, and intentionally pursue the knowledge that will fill those gaps. The world is constantly changing, and those who succeed are not necessarily the most talented, but the most teachable. They're the ones who are willing to unlearn outdated thinking, adapt to new environments, and continually invest in their development. There's a direct connection between your learning and your earning, your learning and your leading, your learning and your becoming. If you stop learning, you stop growing. And when growth stops, the future becomes a repetition of the past instead of a progression into purpose. What most people call failure is often just a refusal to learn. They face challenges they aren't prepared for, make decisions they don't understand, or enter opportunities without the wisdom to sustain them. The future doesn't reward effort alone. It rewards informed effort. It rewards people who understand their craft, their calling, their character, and the context in which they operate. This understanding only comes through learning. Learning gives you an edge. It sharpens your instincts, improves your timing, and expands your capacity to handle more. When you learn, you become more valuable, not just to others, but to yourself. You stop approaching life as a victim and start approaching it as a student. You stop being reactive and start being proactive. Every new piece of insight gives you leverage to negotiate better, to speak with clarity, to build something that lasts, and to see beyond the immediate moment. Ignorance may feel safe, but it's expensive. What you don't know will cost you. Opportunities missed, relationships mishandled, finances mismanaged, and time wasted on paths that lead nowhere. The most dangerous mindset is not the one that lacks knowledge, it's the one that refuses to seek it. Pride blocks learning, so does fear, so does laziness. And each of these becomes a brick in the wall that separates you from your future. But humility opens the door. Curiosity opens the door. Hunger for growth opens the door. The future is not something you stumble into, it's something you learn your way into. You don't become successful by accident. You become successful by design, and design is shaped by information, revelation, and application. It's not enough to gather knowledge. You must apply it, test it, refine it, and live it. No matter where you are right now, you can change your trajectory by changing your willingness to learn. You don't have to have all the answers. You just need to start asking better questions. You don't have to be the best. You just need to be getting better. Every skill can be learned. Every mindset can be reshaped. Every weakness can be developed into strength, not overnight, but over time. If you're willing to learn, your background doesn't matter as much as your mindset. Your past doesn't define you, but your unwillingness to grow will confine you. Learning is the key that unlocks doors you once thought were closed. It turns uncertainty into opportunity and confusion into clarity. Your future is not waiting on a miracle. It's waiting on your maturity. It's waiting on you to rise above ignorance, excuses, and assumptions, and to step into wisdom, preparation, and discipline. And that begins with learning. Learn from mentors. Learn from failure. Learn from history. Learn from books, conversations, and experience. Learn with urgency, with focus, and with humility, because what you're willing to learn will determine what you're capable of achieving, and what you're capable of achieving will shape the future you build. So as we stand on the edge of our potential, let us remember this truth. Ignorance is not harmless. It is a barrier. It feeds fear, clouds judgment, limits confidence, and holds our future hostage. But learning intentional, relentless, and humble learning is the master key. Exposure opens our minds. Knowledge reshapes our beliefs. Understanding unlocks our progress, and growth becomes the path to our destiny. Your future will not be defined by your past, but by what you're willing to pursue, to confront, and most importantly, to learn. Don't let what you don't know keep you from what you're called to become. Commit today to be a student of life, to seek wisdom without apology, and to chase knowledge like your future depends on it, because it does. Thank you.